so much for coming today to hear this, and to all of you who have supported me and welcomed me here in Melbourne over the past 6 months. I can't tell you how much it's meant to me. I'm sort of in new territory, both in this work environment and not just in Melbourne. I'm my first year outside of university and my first time not being in a sort of studying institution or environment, so it's been an interesting journey. Nonetheless, it's been a journey that I'm very grateful for, because I know that I've learned a lot while being here, and I can't express how grateful I am to have had an opportunity to be a part of building something for a movement that I so believe in. I came to YCW, as Stefan said, as a YCS student about 5 years ago. I was following in the footsteps of my older brother, who was also a part of the movement. And we had just gone through a re-establishment of our school, and I had heard about what this movement had done for my brother. I heard stories of protests and of activism, and all I could think was, oh my gosh, I want to be a part of something like this. For the longest time in my life, I've always wanted to live a life about making an impact rather than making an income. But knowing how to get to that point from, I guess, my sort of youth platform hasn't been an easy journey, and it's that same journey that many young people face in all different types of communities across the world. But YCS was there as a sort of platform, as a foundation for my journey, and when that finished at the end of high school, I had the chance to come to YCW, which I think is where the real challenges sort of came. So I came to the YCW movement in Parramatta in the western suburbs of Sydney about 2.5 years ago. So I came as a volunteer or a general member. And my role was to be a part of an initiative called the Volunteer Leadership Program, which was about getting young people from the local community in Parramatta involved in social justice initiatives. But what made us different from other organizations that were working with young people was that we were run by young people, for young people, which is something that's so unique now. It's definitely something that's picking up in our communities. But to me, that was something I'd never heard of before, that I would actually have the opportunity to not only run a program, but to influence other young people's lives. It was a big responsibility, and I'm very grateful that I had a lot of people around me to support me. And so we ran this volunteer leadership program with the hope of touching on different issues in our own community. But the underlying foundation of that was, of course, the See, Judge, Act method. And that was what tied our own realities, our own experiences into the work that we were doing and into the change that we wanted to generate, which is so unique to this movement. When I had sort of, I guess, ran through the first session of that program, I enjoyed it so much that I couldn't wait to do it again. But before we had known, things had sort of begun to change quite dramatically. So about 2 years ago, 3 months after I just come to the movement, the AYCW had sort of just announced that we were kind of at a standstill. We didn't know what to do next. And I was 3 months into the movement, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've just come here, and now things seem to be falling apart. So it was a stressful time. And I still remember that October, the first meeting where I met mentors and collaborators, as well as other young people from around Australia, who were leading their own movements, their own programs. They were presidents, they were workers. They had come together to Sydney in October to have this meeting about how do we keep things going? Have we lost touch with young people? Why is it that we are falling apart? And there were a lot of underlying issues, a lot of things to do with overworking and burning out, things you'd think we would have been reviewing at the time. But it was also an opportunity for us to see what's happened over the past couple of years and what needs to change, and how we speak to the young people now and where we meet them. And we sort of came up with this vision to change things around. And at the time, I wasn't quite sure what was happening. 3 months into the movement, everything seemed a bit too much for me. But at the time, the president for Parramatta, Elizabeth McFarlane, had stepped up to become the national president. And she continues to be that national president. She's also a great source of strength for our movement on a national level. And Elizabeth stepping into that role, a couple of months later, I stepped into the president role for Parramatta. Which was probably even more daunting than stepping into the movement in general, because I wasn't ready. I'd never been a president in anything in my entire life. And to think that someone would give this 18-year-old girl some massive amount of responsibility over a whole group of young people in the western suburbs of Sydney was intense, to say the least. And a lot has changed from the girl I was back then to the girl I am now. So since then, I've been continued to volunteer at the Parramatta YSW, and then the opportunity was given to come to Melbourne to actually be a part of creating something and not just prolonging something. And so I was really lucky that the Parramatta team had stepped up. They were taking on responsibilities. I'd stepped down in the interim of being president, and Sean Gehrig from Parramatta stepped in to be acting president, and I came to Melbourne with the intent of working for the YSW. Now mind you, I'd always managed to avoid working for the movement until this point, and I didn't realize how much I would have wished that I would have started working for the movement a lot sooner in my life. But I came to Melbourne, well, prior to coming to Melbourne, a few things had happened that were sort of crucial before building any type of base here. Hopefully this works. Yeah. It's not really showing the photos. That's a shame. But that's okay. I'll just keep going with the story. So I came to Melbourne with the rest of the national team. So we had our national team meeting here in April. There's quite a funny story to the place that we ended up going to for the camp, but that's another story for another time. We all came together and we met as a national team for the first time since the meeting 2 years ago where we were about to close down. And at this meeting, we had representatives from all over the country, from the movements that were still existing. Adelaide, Perth, Sydney, and nowhere else, no one from Melbourne just yet. And hopefully at our next national conference in December, that will change. But at this particular meeting in April, we came together to discuss the future of our, I guess, our direction, our vision, what we were going to do. We called it Program 2020 because it was what we wanted to achieve in the next couple of years. Now, as we have sort of been moving forward, we've had a lot of growing pains, we're getting more people, we're running more initiatives, we're doing more reviews, we're understanding more about the reality of young people in different areas all around the country. But what we do with that information and how we act on young people's realities and experiences is what truly matters now. So in April, we had a chance to meet with all the mentors and collaborators from Melbourne at a sort of dinner at the Brunswick House. It was my first time coming to the Brunswick House, so I was quite amazed to see all the history in the archive rooms and to meet all of these new faces, and then to realize that these were the faces I was going to be surrounded by for the next 6 months. At the time, I had just graduated when we came back from that conference, and I started working on a plan with Elizabeth and Joe Magri and the rest of the national team as to how we would approach Melbourne. Now, we worked on weeks on this plan. Where we would go first, we spoke to different mentors to ask, to do a bit of a review of life about the areas and to kind of see where we would focus on. At the end of that review, we sort of came to the understanding that the western suburbs was the place that we wanted to focus on, the place that we wanted to approach. Now, I guess a bit more of that understanding came long before I had sort of come into the picture. But the idea was that I would come into this place, into the western suburbs, and that I would start connecting all of, I guess, the people and the actions that were already happening, and that I would kind of find more young people, meet new young people, to see if we could bring all of these ingredients together. Now, I can honestly say now, before I continue with the story, that I am in no way responsible for the sort of reestablishment of the movement. We're still in an early place, and I'm excited to see what happens so far, but we had this plan. And my first day in Melbourne, I came here, and I looked at this plan, and I met a couple of people, and at the end of the week, I thought, this plan is useless. I don't know where I am, I don't know the people I'm going to be meeting, I don't even know how to get in contact with other young people. My first time being at a university, and I realized, I don't know how to make friends or even how to talk to other young people when I'm not already in an environment where they already are. That was my first challenge and continues to be my own personal challenge. But from that experience, I went a bit crazy with planning, and we sort of came up with this strategy. And a few of you who met me in those first weeks would have known that I was probably talking very quickly and a little bit crazily about all the sort of ways I had of outreaching to other young people and other community members and other groups. It was definitely a bit hectic, but I was determined to succeed in finding a group of young people that might continue the work that hopefully I could start, and two, finding someone who might be able to take on that role to then bring all the ingredients truly together and to be responsible for speaking to the reality of the young people that I would encounter with over the next 6 months. And those were my two main goals. There were many other things, and a lot of times there was a lot of replanning. But at the end of the day, we came to a sort of an agreement on how to move forward. And that included engaging with young members of different local council groups, of different organizations, just going to parishes and to masses and just trying to talk to young people, which is very difficult now I've learned, but it was all a learning point for me. At the end of the day, things were moving along slowly, and I realized 6 months is not a lot of time. 6 months is no time in order to build a movement. And it wasn't until a couple of months later that I realized my place wasn't to establish a group. My place was to just understand what was happening on the ground and to see who would be able to sort of really make things happen from a local perspective. And I began to understand my role more and more. And I guess it could have happened a bit more quickly, but those things never happen easily. So that was how things started. And it's interesting that I recall this story now in light of what's happening with the Synod at the moment. And the final document that came from the most recent Synod, it spoke about, I guess, 3 stages of the journey. And it connected the story of young people in the Catholic Church to the story of Jesus and the road to Emmaus. And what I found interesting about the fact that we connected onto this story was when I first met Elizabeth and I'd first come to the movement 2 years ago, we spoke about the renewal of YCW in Australia as a part of, I guess, a reflection on the road to Emmaus. And that in everything we would do, in everything that we would say, all the people we would employ and send out to do the work of the YCW, we would remind ourselves of this story. And that was, at the heart of that was God that was always with us. No matter what we did, we weren't alone. We had our friends, we had our fellow YCW members, and we had God with us. And as I continued over the next couple of months, we sort of tried our hands at a lot of different things. I wish I could show you more pictures about this, but maybe I'll send them to Stefan just to post on the Facebook page. And we ran a few things. So straight off the bat, there were 2 people, I guess, that I met straight away, 2 young people that have sort of been with me throughout the whole 6 months. I met them at a local council community group, and from then we've run initiatives and programs together, and we then continued into finding a way, and that's how I met Tiami, the new full-timer. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When I first came, there was already a group of ex-YCS members and students who have been an integral part of, I guess, my role here and getting me on my feet and supporting me to begin with. So I can honestly say I'm nothing without the mentors and the collaborators that have been supporting me here, and it's the same for the movement on a local and on a national level. We are nothing without the experience that has come before us, and the support that comes from that experience. But when I met the ex-YCS girls, Tess Whelan, who is here with us today, is one of them. I was very blessed to have the support of these girls and their experience, and they were actually the first young women, the first young people that I had the chance to engage with on a local level. And from there, I sort of felt, okay, I can do this. This is something that can be done. If I can engage with other young people, then that's where my role is. My role is to meet young people where they are. That is the mission of this movement. And from there, I started meeting more and more young people. Specific girls come to mind. Her name is Julianne, and another girl is Lily. And we sort of came together with Jessica Russell, who used to be the YCS worker here in Melbourne about a year ago. And we decided to run our first event, or our first action, which came out of a review about our communities. And so I was very blessed to have Fred come along every Wednesday morning to the office to teach me more about the history of the movement and about different types of inquiries. And he taught me about things like the systematic inquiry and the social inquiry. And these are things I really wanted to try. I'd heard from David about the sign of the times and so many amazing things that YCW used to do to understand the reality of young people. And I thought, why don't I try and revive these to sort of do my own C-section of the review of life. And this can be where I start. Let this be where it begins again. And so from there, I branched out these girls, Julianne, Lily, and Jess, who lived in the eastern suburbs, to come together, and we did a review of life about what was important to us. Now, coming from an environmental background, I have to say I think I'm a little biased when it comes to the issues I want to focus on, sustainability being one of them. But I was very fortunate that I sort of found, I guess, kindred spirits in the first few young people that I had a chance to actually do the review of life with, to do the See Judge Act with. And these girls were very passionate about climate change and food wastage, and they thought, you know what, why don't we begin here? Why don't we just talk about something we're passionate about? Why don't we invite our friends, other members of our community, to do this review of life? Let's start here. And we did that. And from that came our first sort of action day, which was to run some workshops and a review of life with other young people connected to us. We had about 19 people that came to that day, and we sort of filled the Brunswick office with young people and food, more food than young people, to be honest. I've learned that that's probably what calls people to things more than just friendship, but it began with food. And we decided to run different workshops, things like how do I recycle, and how to kind of be sustainable when you go to a shopping center, not using shopping bags, and all things that sound quite hippie to begin with, but they were things that were important to us nonetheless. And this is where we started. So the day began with sort of reviewing our realities, and we got a chance to meet a lot of other young people, those that we knew and those that came from outer circles. And that was the first action day that had come from that. And now we sort of have an action group that's more online, but I'd love to sort of bring them together again so that we continue. The main thing was that the key leaders that had been a part of creating that day and coordinating those workshops had now some sense of ownership over those actions and over what would become, and what hopefully will become, the Melbourne YCW. From there, we had run some other actions. We got involved in the community. We applied for grants. One of them was successful and will continue in the next year, but that was also how I came to meet Tiami. And Tiami had been, it was quite interesting. I don't know if it's fate or whatever it is, but we met each other at one of the sort of the actions that had come from doing an environmental review, and it involved getting associated with this community group called Seat at the Table and Health West, who had funded us to run a workshop about mental health and well-being and identity, and to connect this to what I'm passionate about, and that was a sensory garden, or I guess it really is just it's a garden. That's